right. Well, hi, Jane. Thanks for joining me. Jane and I know each other from the natural foods world. She is an incredible herbalist, and I was drawn to her through her herbal practice, but then we quickly figured out that we both liked astrology. So, welcome, Jane. Thanks for talking to me today in the astrology realm.
Thank you, Christa. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to have known you all these years and to link our worlds, as you were saying.
Yeah.
It just shows everything is connected.
Yeah, yeah. You have a book that we're going to talk about, and but I was really just really blown away that you got Rosemary Gladstar to write the the intro to the book. That's a stellar introduction, but it also speaks to the type of herbalist you are. That you are in that Rosemary Gladstar echelon of female leaders that have really pioneered teaching and connecting with plants and connecting with planets. And if you know Rosemary Gladstar, then you should be a fan of Jane Stevens because she's right there with her.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, a little backstory on that one is that I signed all my contracts according to expanding moon signs and dynamic. So I just wanted this thing to fly, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it. Plus, Rosemary said if it would have been a herb book, she probably wouldn't have done it. But this is a subject she was always interested in.
Hmm.
Yeah, her intro is so beautiful, talking about her time growing up in California with her parents. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so do you want to show your book, or I can show you my copy? It's called The Celestial Garden. You have one here, and it's talking about a lot of things, but centered mostly around the moon. So I asked before recording if you would read an excerpt that you included in your book. It's from Lee Lehman's Book of Rulerships about the moon. So do you mind reading that little passage out for us?
no, I'd be happy to. Um, so I did come across this quote from the 17th century astrologer William Lilly and about the moon and what all it governs. The book was called The Book of Rulerships. So the moon rules the body, emotions, moods, changeability, memory, ethereal habits, rhythms, down-bearing, cold, moist, phlegmatic, organs with contained spaces, feelings, basic needs, your mother, mothering, yin, astrological sign of Cancer, stomach, breasts, lungs, the brain, all bodies of water, the stomach, and the linings of internal organs. The moon rules round things, figures like our bodies. It's related to sulfur, Pluto. Monday is moon day. Round vegetables, cabbages, pomegranate, coconuts, trailing plants such as melons, cucumbers, corn, salty things, milk and dairy products, sweets, pearls, emeralds, moonstone, ducks, cranes, herons, silver metal and white color, frogs, the otter, snails, midwives, nurses, queens, countesses, ladies of all manner of women, as also the common people, messengers. The moon holds memories, even lifetimes ago, imprinting on mothers, the subconscious, our emotions, and psychology. I bet you see some rhythms in that list, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. And it was fun to see you smile during some of them, like the round bodies and the round vegetables, and just imagining a world where all of that exists simultaneously. Like that's our world. Like we get to kind of experience that if we find those patterns and find that the lunar reflection in our own life. And I mean, I personally love the moon. I think most people love the moon. When we're kids, we connect with the moon. It's like one of the things that we can kind of see change faces and I'm sure that we can shake our fists at the moon and be mad at it. But for the most part, most people really like the moon. And so I just love that you wrote basically a book about the moon and the connections that we have with it through plants and gardening.
Yeah, and when I was studying this too, I wondered when it's a full moon and you have the moon, the earth, and the sun in alignment, why isn't it all a big shadow? And when I found that it's 5 degrees off the moon and the sun, providing all that light, I just felt like so supportive, like
Hmm.
there's something out there that loves us, that wants to give us this rhythm and this beauty and this
Yeah.
comfort. And that's what I find in nature so much. There's so much comfort that comes from paying attention to nature. And you can find so much security and joy, and like so many good virtues can come from that.
So, like, what came first for you then? Was it kind of relating to the planets or relating to the plants and then kind of seeing, the as above, so below connection?
If I'm understanding your question right, what happened was I just wanted to be outside for a career, so
Mm,
I chose horticulture for college. From there, my first job out of school, I was asked to put in a herb garden, so started specializing in herbs. Then, when my son was born and I had a little acreage and started my company, Four Elements Organic Herbals, I started using herbs for medicine because they were so much more effective than taking my son to the doctor. Then I layered on the Old Farmer's Almanac.
mm,
So, and by writing this book, I took several classes at the Kepler College and for astrology just to gain more knowledge on astrology. So, although, I'd say that part came last.
yeah, yeah.
Although I've been doing gardening with the Farmer's Almanac for 35 years. So,
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you wrote that I wrote down is that nature always wins when it comes to timing, and knowing like knowing how much things can fluctuate when you work in not climate controlled inside, that you're working with the elements and the fluctuations of nature. It seems like it would temper your idea of timing, just working with natural elements and running a farm as a business for is tricky because you are working kind of with those senses of timing. So it seems like it would teach you just the elements of the moon and the elements of lunations without beating you over the head with it, because it's like you don't see the wind, you see what the wind pushes. So you see kind of the influence that the different lunations have on the things that you're growing. Have you found that to be the case? Like that when you did study astrology, maybe you already understood a lot of the fluctuations of the moon because you're looking at them through the lens of growing lemongrass in Wisconsin, which still kind of blows my mind that you do.
lots of lemongrass.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would say that it's definitely changed my sense of timing, but it really works well with me because although the flip side of that coin is when I'm late for meetings,
All right.
people like know my personality and I'm like, why am I always late? It's like, oh, because it's like spring, summer, fall, winter, morning, afternoon, night. Like my
Mm,
sense of timing is really much more broad than,
mm.
our Western world.
Yeah, yeah. You use the moon as like a practical tool, and you write about that in your book too. Um, what do you like? What are some examples of how you can use the moon just practically for somebody that doesn't run a farm as a business, but just in like your planter garden, or like just connecting with plants? Like, how would you use the moon practically from your experience?
Well, first of all, I love, if anyone meditates, you wake up in the morning and you want to like jump into something else, right? But it's like, no, this is an important thing I need to do. So you have to let go of like your ego and your personality drive and let go to a higher force. And I think gardening by the moon is like that because it's like, oh, I've got my seeds. I just want to plant today. And then if
Mm,
you look, that might guide you to weed that day. And,
mm,
I love the sense of dropping like the ego drive personality and going with what is the rhythm that's actually out there.
mm,
So I really like that. And in a practical sense, too, I have to say that I put out newsletters and I try to do promotional things. And like I signed the contracts for this book, for example, only when the moon is waxing.
Hmm.
And or even close to the full moon. And it's fun to tune into planetary hours and things like that too. But um, also, you just can't help but think as you do those things, how it aligns your intention with your action more
Hmm.
too. And it just really feels so real in
Yeah.
that.
I mean, the way when you speak about that, it seems like in the world that we live in, in a capitalist, kind of aggressive world, it is very solar in that sense, where there is like timing, the trains have to run on time, everything, it's endless. It's never ceasing. It does not fluctuate. Time is linear in that sense. And it's very solar. It's very ego. It's very fiery. It's very singular. It's observable. And the other side, the foil to that, is that meandering, wandering. Things can change, things can move around. It fluctuates depending on what the mood is. And one of the things that really kind of surprised me when I read the book about how, of course, water follows the moon. You can see those great visualizations of the tides, like following the moon as it goes around. And I guess if I thought about it, I would assume, well, yeah, the water still follows the moon at the new moon, but the way you wrote it, it's like water still follows the moon during a new moon. Even though we can't see it, water is still drawn to it. And there's something about the emotional realm and that dark realm and that cool realm that is antithetical to that solar energy that we experience just in our life. And maybe it's harder to tap into those watery fluctuations. Maybe we don't give it as much power because it is hidden or unseen. But there is something about the element of that dark, watery nature of the moon as like a balancer to that fiery, forceful energy of the sun. And I think that working with plants and the moon can kind of help individually us find that balance, that work-life balance, basically, because it seems like the sun is more work and the moon is more life. It fills in or kind of braids around that ceaselessness of the sun.
I really love the way you said that. And I'm testing a theory that I have, and it has to do with politics. Sorry. But, I just wondered what happened after Election Day when we stepped into our world where I wondered why could people go into a voting booth and choose a felon over a public defender?
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered in a really open mind and thought, just culturally, we don't trust women as leaders. And that's kind of what you were saying. We live in such an overt world. And like I was in my local environmental group last night as a board member, and I could absolutely see this dynamic taking over. And these are like my bros. These aren't these are tree hugging guys, but still, it's we live in this very overt world, and I think it's high time that we really do honor these rhythms,
Mm.
and the female, the dark, warm, side. And so, just thank you for bringing that up. I just want
Yeah.
to share that thought.
Well, I've seen that we're just within the astrology community and in the herbal community that for the most part, the men stand up and they become teachers of schools, both in astrology and in herbalism. And most of the work behind the scenes, the formulation, the patterning, the schedule, the moon as a symbol of people really speaks to this. But the I saw it first in the herbal world where there were so many female herbalists, and yet the ones that were really trying to make a name and be the leaders were the men. And nothing against really good herbalists, whether you're a man or a woman, but it stood out.
Hmm.
And in astrology, it's similar. Most of the astrologers that are in the astrology world are women, and the ones that really stand up to be the leaders and run schools and make themselves known it's that solar male energy. And I think
Hmm.
that we're just designed to kind of defer to that. So of course we're going to see it in politics. We see it in religion. We see it just in our own communities. We see it with the paternal energy.
Hmm.
And we see that has proven to be destructive for
Yeah,
for all. So it's like how do
right.
we bring those rhythms within our own world, within our neighborhood, within our politics, within our the schools and the industries in which we work, because I feel like that pattern repeats. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Women, use your voices, and
Hmm.
men, listen.
Yeah. And for men to find their own feminine rhythms too, because I think that
Yes.
we all kind of defer to that. We really um I'm a day sect, I have sun above the horizon, I'm not so I find that like I like the solar energy. I like to be seen, I like to say things, I like to be engaging, and I like to be social, and I participate in capitalism. Like all those things are very solar. And a balancer to nourish is to tend to the things that are unseen and to not advertise everything that I do, and to make those connections on a deep personal meditative level, and to incorporate those rhythms in life. And I think that just working with the moon is such a great gateway, because the moon acts as that emissary, or that translator, or that mediator of all the other planets to us. Um,
Yeah.
there was one thing I wanted to ask, because there was a French phrase, and it was chopping wood, and it said soft wood when waxing, hard wood when waning. I know that's a detour from what we were just talking about, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you have all these little anecdotes about that, about the moon and how it infiltrates all these different areas of life, but that one stood out. Can you speak a little bit about just about that phrase?
Yeah, and it goes perfectly with what you're talking about, the tides.
Hmm.
So if you picture, as the moon is waxing, the water table is moving up closer to the soil surface.
Hmm.
And it's fun to teach this in the Midwest, where so many people haven't lived near the ocean. But if you explain, that even though it's happening on the ocean, it's also happening below the surface of our soil here. So as the moisture is rising, picture the plants are taking it up, the branches of trees are absorbing that, and that moisture is making them more flexible.
Hmm.
So then, after the full moon, as the water table is decreasing, you would picture that even through osmotic pressure, the moisture would be a little bit decreased in the plant tissue, so that if you wanted to cut wood for burning, it'd be better to cut that as the moon is waning.
Hmm. So you sign contracts when the moon is waxing, but then this example of doing something when the moon's waning, what other examples do you do when the moon is kind of descending or reducing in water content? Like, do you use the moon kind of on that darker edge when it is waning or becoming new?
Yeah, like that would be a good time to have deeper conversations, or be more meditative, or maybe pull away from your society and such. Like I
Mm-hmm.
try to never sign up for shows around a new moon, because people just aren't that overt typically.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and that's a good time for weeding or setting traps, or like if I wanted to prune, I prune this. I had a different house that the mice won, and we had to tear it down anyway. I had this shrub in the back. It was a viburnum, and it would grow so much that
Oh
it would
yeah.
cover the windows. So I would cut that in the fourth quarter during usually a fire sign, or perhaps an air sign, when it was drier. And that would work so well to keep that shrub from growing up fast. So
Hmm.
you can use, decreasing energy. You might want to use it at times for difficult conversations,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, things like that.
Yeah, the sense of like letting it release and letting it go, just so that you don't have to maybe repeat it later on if it's something is growing, allowing that release of a waning moon. Um, can you talk a little bit about just the phases of the moon and how you might use them, and just gardening?
Yes, that's my specialty. Yeah. So, yeah. So, as say, there's the new moon, and So this is a good time to grab your seed packets and get everything in order. Get your flats together. You might want to make your labels. And I always make my labels with whatever phase of the moon is and what sign the moon is. So
Mm,
you can kind of track that through its growing season.
mhm,
Um, once the moon is new and then by the way, the new moon and the full moon have their same energy for a couple days around those events. So, like for an example, I do a full moon meditation every month, and we do that for 5 days, 2 days before, the day of, and two
mm,
days after.
mhm,
So you can use, if you wait a couple days after the new moon, you're still good with that new moon energy. But anyway, then you would, especially during a earth or water sign, get your seed packets and plant your seeds during the new moon, especially the seeds that contain the seeds outside the fruit, like like lettuces for leafy
mm,
things for
mhm.
sure, spinach. And then at the time of the first quarter, where the moon is shaped like a D
Oh yeah.
in the northern hemisphere. Your listeners should know. Like so the new moon is blank, right? And the first quarter, the moon is shaped like a D. Think of the word dock
Mhm.
if you're in the northern hemisphere, cod if you're in the southern hemisphere. But anyway, so then the full moon is the O, and the C is the way the moon is shaped during the last quarter. So anyway, back to planting seeds. The first quarter, then you would plant the seeds where the seeds are inside the fruit. So tomatoes, peppers,
Mm.
melons, things like that, cucumbers. Uh, and then at the full moon, this is where the water table is highest, but it starts decreasing. So this is the time to plant root crops. And this is where I've really seen a difference
Mm.
between planting at the wrong time and the right time. I gave an example in the book of
The
my husband.
carrots.
Oh, the carrots.
Yeah.
Well, that was a harvest situation. But the potatoes, there's an old-timey phrase that says plant potatoes on Good Friday. And the reason why that is a saying, and I love asking the question when I give this talk, because there's a couple, like 2 out of 100 old timers that'll remember this old phrase. And what it is because Easter falls on the first full moon after the spring equinox. Oh, the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. And to reverse that, it would be the spring equinox, then there's a full moon, and the Sunday after that is Easter. So
Mhm.
if you look at Good Friday, it's always in the third quarter of the moon
Yeah.
because it's past the full moon. So anyway, my husband was going out to plant potatoes like the first quarter, and I just said, you're planting them at the wrong time, but if you want to, just save me 20% of them or something. And he did. And I planted them after the full moon. And I remember him walking in. He said, I'm so disappointed with the potato crop. They're small and there's not many. And my eyebrows raised up. And I thought, ooh, I wonder what mine will look like. So I dug them up and they were much bigger and more plentiful. Like
Wow.
so that's a really good fun trick for your listeners to try is to plant potatoes on two different moon phases because
Yeah.
we really saw a difference.
Can you tell the carrot story about harvesting? And because this was like
Oh,
the cruelty of time, of
yeah.
how nature always wins.
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, but hey, we all are humans and we try to fit things in our schedule, right?
Yeah.
So the weather, the time, whatever was right. And I knew it was the wrong time to dig up carrots because it was way too watery
Mm.
and for storage. And the way I store carrots, by the way, is in just a plastic 5-gallon bucket that I layer with vermiculite. And they keep, around 40 degrees all winter really well. So, I thought, well, I have my system in place. I know how I'm doing it. I know I'm not doing it the right day, but I'm just going to go for it
Mm.
anyway. So, sure enough, halfway through the winter, I was going to sweep out that area of the barn and set them outside and forgot about them. And then they all froze and rotted. So, I mean, I like to believe that everything's connected and,
Hmm.
maybe it has nothing to do with that. I don't know, but it's interesting when you follow these archetypal patterns or things that are more, less overt, that you'll find so much truth in them,
Hmm.
whether it's a bucket of rotting carrots or whatever,
Yeah.
I like to see things that way.
Yeah, and you learn so much from mistakes, It's like you don't necessarily have the memory when you got things perfectly right. You might remember that moment of like, oh, it just I love that it turned out this way. But because it didn't cause you grief, it's harder to actually remember the story. We usually remember the stories that are still kind of nagging at us, but those are helpful to then avoid in the future. So I think that's why I like that story. It's like that reminder of every time I didn't listen to an intuitive impulse, I remember it because it got my attention as like a little, a little slap in the face of like, don't take this for granted, just follow this natural law and you will, be taken care of. But the mistakes are so helpful. You learn so much more from the mistakes than from just getting it right, but either by accident or good grace or whatever the reason, you
That's
know.
beautiful. Thank you for that.
So RIP carrots. So you, at the end of the book, and you and I talked earlier this year, kind of like what your plan is for the year. And I like that you talked about making a sanctuary garden and you talked about chakra garden. And so, you know, briefly, how would you instruct somebody if they wanted to connect with the moon through plants? And they had a little bit of space. Maybe they have, a quarter acre, not nothing too crazy. What would you suggest? How would you direct them? I mean, first get the book so that you can have these ideas, because she does put a lot of design suggestions in here. But outside of that, like just for listeners, where do people start?
I love your question, but I even want to dial it down a little more that even if you have a balcony,
Mm.
the way you could connect is, even some of the plants that I mentioned, like actually red cabbages are so ornamental. I think a red cabbage on a deck would be so cool.
Yeah.
But a vine of a cucumber vine, I mean, that would be subject to wind. You'd have to protect it from the wind, and it's trickier to water a vine in a container. But I think to connect with the moon, I would choose even from that list from William Lilly,
Mm.
something
Hmm.
white, like a datura or a nicotiana that blooms, nicotiana lata, which is a night scented, jasmine scented tobacco plant. They open at night and they release this amazing scent. That would make a great patio plant. Um, so, I think just growing a few plants that will help draw you into your garden and give you time to reflect and just to be and be in that yin place where you're more receptive.
Hmm.
I think that's really good. And of course, the whole joy and fun of putting your planting puzzle together through this moon gardening, moon phase, and astrological gardening, I think is really a great start too.
Yeah. Do you ever grow moonflowers?
I don't anymore. I had this job back in the beginning of my career when I put in that herb garden where I had to grow datura,
Hmm.
and touching that plant in a greenhouse was so stinky.
Mm.
And I think that's what you're referring to as a moonflower, Datura stramonium.
Well, datura doesn't isn't datura toxic?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the moonflower that I've grown, it has a similar shape of the blossom, but the leaves are different.
Okay.
And it's not sticky. The seed pod would be really big and dark at the end of the year. I don't know. I've known datura more in drier climates.
Yeah.
And moonflower, they definitely look alike, but their scent is intoxicating.
Okay.
I
I
love
want to
moonflower.
I want to know, yeah, I want to know what the genus, which plant you're talking about. So
Yeah.
no, I haven't grown that one, but I am a fan of the night scented tobacco,
Hmm.
and I've grown that. Actually, at that same job, I had to grow about 50 different species of tobacco too.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
also pretty sticky.
yeah, not so stinky.
Not so stinky.
Yeah.
So before we close out, I wrote a note about the ascending and descending moon relation to gardening. And so can you speak just a little bit about that, about what you call an ascending or descending moon? Is that the waxing and waning phase?
I took that from Maria Thun's book, and I don't really use that practice so much. I introduced it in the book just as a guideline, but I go with our straight up waxing and waning moon.
Hmm.
I found it was interesting rhythm, though, of the planets and how it could pull water.
Hmm.
But I'm really such like a basic like organic farmer that layered on the old farmer's almanac
Hmm.
that I haven't even done the biodynamic
Hmm.
style of that because I'm more geocentric
Yeah.
than sidereal and
Hmm.
and for your listeners that just means that more earth centric than the cosmic space of being where you're landing before you're I mean, to me that's like astral travel.
Yeah, yeah. And to use sidereal zodiac, it doesn't take into consideration the precession of the equinoxes. To me, it's just like you can get to the same place regardless of which system you use. But it is, my sister used the biodynamic farming calendar, and her moons are different than mine, but she uses it for different reasons. So I just kind of sit with it. And from her, I'll find the Latin name of the moonflower that she always gives me to grow, because it would be fun just to send you some seeds from her.
Yes, I want to try
From
it now. I want to grow it, of course.
um, the conclusion of your book, I notated it. You talked about what matters most. So if you don't mind, if I read a little bit of this, and then maybe you can comment, we can close out.
Thank
You
you.
wrote, linking the planets to the plants is a lens that reveals a much bigger orchestra than is commonly perceived or respected in our Western culture, which I think kind of speaks to what we were talking about. It's like valuing that yin dark time in the garden, that
Mm.
maybe isn't seen, but it is still good work. At a time when so many people have been trained to see division instead of unity, the practice of observing the chords that tie the universal energy together creates a sense of peace and acceptance. And I loved that. I felt like just reading that was, it's like quietly revolutionary to acknowledge that it is way more radical to attempt to truly connect than it is to just define oneself outside of the thread of a larger fabric. And to me, that's what, you and I have multiple connections through astrology and through the natural foods world and herbalism. And through that connection, like, we are able to then have these larger concentric circles around us. And just the attempt of unity to me is just like such a beautiful and quiet and humble radical act. And I loved reading that just kind of in your book, that was kind of what you value.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for your interpretation. It was very beautiful. But yeah, I think unity is really important. It is a fact of life that everything is connected, and we just are so programmed to see divisions, and it's so uh, going backwards, and where so many people are falling for that. And if you look to nature, you'll just see how so much everything is connected. And even like how certain pollinators go to certain plants. Like it's such a beautiful web of life, and nature is such a beautiful teacher. Just, I'm really appreciative of your work too, to help people to focus on that, step outside,
Mm-hmm.
look at what's really happening with no agenda.
Yeah. Before we go, I'm going to share my screen to show people. Um, this is your book. Jane's website is 4 Elements Herbals, and she has all of her tinctures and her awesome body oils, but this is the subject of today is the book. So you can buy this directly from Jane. You can find it probably on online booksellers too, but it's always best to get it right from the author if you can. So yeah, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sitting for an interview. Anything else you want to add before we close out?
Just, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And yes, I would encourage your listeners to check out my products and see if you can feel some of that dynamic energy that comes from collecting our seeds and sowing them according to the moon cycles. And if you want me to sign your book, just put a note in with your order. I think you can do that as you order online, and I'd be happy to sign it as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Jane. It was good to connect here, and thanks everybody for listening.
All right. Thank you, Christa.